I used to work for a very small company, a startup, and I was their night security guard. To be honest, I was never entirely sure what they did. The office was not much to look at. It was tucked away on the third floor of an old building, unremarkable, just like any other suite you might see. It seemed too small, too ordinary, to even warrant a security guard, which I found a little strange. This was in a quiet, older part of the city, not a high-crime area. My job was easy though, because I did not have to patrol multiple floors all night. My shift began at 9 o'clock in the evening. The first thing I would do was turn on the security alarm systems, a simple task, before heading to my little security room. This room, more like a cramped closet, was where all the camera screens were set up. The place only had outdoor cameras, which were really low quality, grainy, and often blurry, especially at night. It was barely enough to see general movement, let alone specific details. The first couple of hours went by very slowly. It was the usual routine, absolutely nothing going on. The stillness of the building at night always felt a bit heavy. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, though, a sound broke through the quiet. It was a distinct clicking, like a latch being opened and then closed. It was faint, but in the silence of the office, it stood out. I sat there for a moment, confused, trying to figure out what it could have been. My mind immediately went to the possibility of a door, but that did not make sense. I stood up slowly and opened the door to the hallway. Everything looked exactly how I had left it. The corridor was narrow and quiet, lit by the dim emergency lights. There were only 3 doors down this hallway, and each one was closed, just as they should have been. I walked over to each door, my footsteps echoing a little too loudly in the stillness. I opened them one by one, briefly looking around the rooms. They were layered with a bunch of office desks, chairs pushed neatly underneath, computer monitors turned off. From what I could see, it was all normal, nothing out of place. No one was hiding, no windows were open. By then, enough time had passed for me to start wondering if the sound I heard was actually what I thought it was. Perhaps I just did not hear it correctly. Maybe it was just the building settling, an old pipe, or the wind outside. After all, the security system should have triggered an alarm if someone had opened one of the main doors to get inside. I was certain of that. So, I went back to my small security room. This time, I left the door open to the hallway. My thought was that if I heard it again, it would be much clearer, leaving no doubt. Then, I sat back down and continued monitoring the low-quality cameras. I checked the footage from the previous few minutes, just to see if I had missed anything. But I did not see anything at all. There was no movement outside the building. The grainy black and white feed showed nothing but the empty parking lot and the dark, quiet street. Another 20 minutes passed. I think by then I had pretty much come to terms that whatever I had heard was nothing important. I was back to not paying as much attention, my eyes glazing over the camera feeds, my mind drifting. Then, a sound echoed down the hallway. It was fainter than the first, a soft creak. It was unmistakably a door opening, very slowly. My heart jumped up from my chest. I shot up from my chair and walked into the hallway, not believing what I had just heard. I immediately saw that one of the doors, the one furthest down the hall, was cracked open. It was only open by a sliver, but it was enough to see the deep, unyielding darkness within the office room. Knowing that none of the alarms had gone off and nothing had shown up on the cameras, I was extremely confused. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I was sure that nobody could be in here, that it was impossible. My mind tried to rationalize it away, thinking maybe the door was not fully closed when I checked it earlier, but a deep sense of dread settled over me. I crept over to the door, my steps slow and cautious, trying not to make a sound. I pushed it open a little further, revealing the dark office room completely. The air inside felt heavy, cold, and still. I took a few hesitant steps inside. My eyes strained in the darkness, trying to make out any shapes. I did not hear or see anything right away. The room was large, filled with rows of desks. I started to walk further in, going past each office desk, my hand lightly touching the edge of a monitor, feeling for any warmth. The silence of the room was unsettling, a profound quiet that felt unnatural. As I got to the very back of the room, near the far wall, I saw the slightest movement. It was on one of the walls, a fleeting blur, like a shadow darting just beyond my full vision. My head instantly snapped in that direction. Before I could fully turn my head, my eyes locked with a person. They were crouched underneath one of the desks, almost completely hidden in the deeper shadows of the room. It was a man. He had black hair that looked a little greasy and large dark circles under his eyes, making them seem sunken and deep. He had a look of both fear and anger on his face, a strange mix. It was like he was both mad and worried that I had found him. His eyes, though, were fixed on me with an intensity that made my blood run cold. The instant we saw each other, he started to get up. My mind raced. I had no idea if he had any kind of weapons on him. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat. I took no chances. Fear, raw and unthinking, flooded over me. I turned and started running for my life. I burst out of that dark office room, down the short hallway, and out the front doors of the building. As I cleared the threshold, the security alarm shrieked to life, a blaring, piercing sound that cut through the night. The system automatically notified the police, a small comfort in my panic. I ran a safe distance away from the building, across the parking lot and onto the street, before stopping. My lungs burned and my legs felt like jelly. From my new vantage point, I tried to watch the front doors of the building, waiting for the officers to show up. It felt like an eternity, but it only took about 30 seconds before the door swung open again. The man came running out, moving with surprising speed. He did not look in my direction. He ran around to the other side of the building, disappearing quickly into the darkness. And from there, I lost sight of him completely. The police arrived shortly after, their sirens wailing, their flashing lights illuminating the night. When the officers got there, we went inside, and they began their investigation. We downloaded the footage from the entire night. We meticulously reviewed every minute, but nowhere in it did we see the man enter the building. There was no trace of his arrival on the cameras, nothing. So, we did not know when or even how he had gotten in. It was a complete mystery, a chilling void in the timeline. Obviously, the other pressing question was why he had broken in. What was his purpose? What did he want? After discussing it with the company's management the next morning, they said they knew absolutely nothing about it. They claimed nothing was missing from the office. This seemed suspicious to me. I had a hunch that they might have known more than they let on. Hiring security for their tiny office, one that seemed so insignificant, was not normal, unless you had a very specific reason to. It always struck me as odd, even before this incident. I thought perhaps it might have actually been an old employee, someone they knew was a little unhinged, perhaps with a grudge or some strange obsession with the company. The whole situation felt far too personal for a random break-in. I stayed there for another few months, continuing my shifts, but I was always on edge, always looking for shadows. The memory of his eyes, that strange mix of fear and anger, stuck with me. Eventually, I called it quits for a better job, one with more typical responsibilities and less unsettling mysteries. I never found out anything else about what happened that night. The company remained tight-lipped, and the police investigation seemed to go nowhere. The man simply vanished as mysteriously as he appeared, leaving behind only questions and a lingering sense of unease that I still carry with me to this day. The idea that someone could be in a place, unseen, unheard, waiting in the dark, still gives me a shiver every time I think about it. It was a profound lesson in how fragile our sense of security can be, even in the most ordinary of places. This happened during our school's winter break. It was the day after Christmas, and I had a part-time job at our town's local pizza shop. This place, known as The Slice, was pretty popular, especially among the younger crowd. It felt like pretty much every kid at my school also worked there at some point. Being so young though, every paycheck, no matter how small, made me feel like I was rich. So, I always agreed to work whenever they needed me, eager for those extra hours and the feeling of independence they brought. I thought it would not be that busy on this particular day. I imagined everyone would be staying home, still wrapped up in their holiday bubble with their families. But I could not have been more wrong. Around dinner time, all the indoor seats were taken up, and we were getting tons of delivery orders. My job was typically to greet and seat people, or to do deliveries if needed, especially during peak hours. Around 8 o'clock in the evening, my manager told me to start taking deliveries. I did a quick one to a house just a few blocks away, then picked up another order from the kitchen and got back on the road. This one was a single, large pizza, destined for a home about 20 minutes away on the outskirts of town. At least the roads were not busy. They were actually really dead, surprisingly empty. There was barely anyone outside, which was a very odd change of atmosphere from the bustling, noisy pizza shop. Snow was lightly falling down, soft flakes drifting lazily from the sky. It was really only visible under the yellow glow of the streetlights, catching the beams like tiny, illuminated dancers. The air was cold, crisp, and still. It was so peaceful. I actually drove the speed limit, something I rarely did, and tried to soak it in, enjoying the quiet moment before I had to return to the chaos of work. Eventually, I got to the customer's house. It was not really in a traditional neighborhood. It was directly off the side of the main road, with its own long, winding gravel path leading up to it. The house was surrounded by snow-covered pine trees, tall and dark, creating a dense, almost impenetrable wall around the property. The house itself was adorned with over-the-top Christmas decorations, bright lights and inflatable figures covering every available surface on their house and front yard. It was a veritable spectacle of festive cheer. They had not plowed their driveway, though, which made it difficult to find a place to park without getting my small car stuck in the growing drifts. I did the best I could, carefully maneuvering my vehicle, then got out with their order, holding the warm pizza box. One thing I noticed when walking up to their house was that while all the outdoor lights and decorations were turned on, blazing with holiday spirit, not a single light inside the house was on. At least, that was what I could see from the front of the house. It struck me as odd, a stark contrast to the exterior. As I walked closer, my eyes naturally scanned the ground. I realized there were fresh shoe prints in the pristine snow leading up to the front porch. I figured it was the owner, obviously, having just gone inside. When I got up to the porch, though, a small sense of unease started to creep in. The shoe prints did not go straight up to the front door, as one would expect. Instead, they went around to the side of the porch, disappearing beyond my line of sight, as if someone had walked around the corner of the house. I thought that was weird, but I quickly dismissed it. Hey, it was none of my business. Maybe they had just stepped out for a moment. Anyway, I knocked on the door, a firm rap with my knuckles. The cold was starting to seep into my bones. It was pretty chilly out there, the quiet only broken by the soft whisper of the wind and the gentle fall of snow. After 30 seconds, with no response, I knocked again, a little louder this time. It was so quiet outside, just a low breeze and falling snow, and yet I still heard nothing inside the house. No sounds, no movement, just a profound silence that felt out of place. I double-checked the receipt to make sure I needed the payment. I did. They had not paid online. The shoe prints in the snow were fresh, so they had to be home, right? Getting frustrated and starting to shiver, I knocked one last time, very loudly. It probably sounded like I was shaking the whole house. Still, nobody answered. A wave of irritation washed over me, quickly followed by a growing sense of discomfort. After that, I gave up. I left the pizza on the porch, a silent act of surrender, and went back to my car. I got in, my fingers stiff with cold, and tried to turn it on. But it would not start. The engine kept stalling, sputtering weakly before dying completely. I swore under my breath, a frustrated murmur, as I tried relentlessly to get it going, turning the key again and again. I only got more frustrated by the second, and my hands were getting colder and colder. Then, I happened to glance up. My eyes widened. I saw a person standing outside the house. They were completely bundled up in winter clothes, thick boots, a heavy jacket, snow pants, everything. They were standing perfectly still, just watching me. I got out of my car, my voice a little strained. "Hey," I called out. "Did you order the pizza? I'd been out here knocking on your door for 5 minutes." They did not say anything. Instead, they began walking slowly, deliberately, toward me. It took me a few seconds to realize something was not right. The way they moved, the unhurried, steady pace, felt menacing. Their silence was deafening. A sudden cold dread washed over me, a feeling far more intense than the winter air. I got back in my car, my movements quick and jerky. The way they kept their pace, not hurrying or anything, gave me the chilling impression that they knew I could not leave, and that they were in no rush. That's when I started to panic. My hands trembled as I began dialing 911 on my phone. They continued their slow, unwavering approach. Just when the officer on the other end of the line asked what my emergency was, the person outside my car started speaking. He had a low, deep voice, muffled slightly by the distance and the falling snow. He kept asking if I needed help. How the hell would he know that? I thought, my heart pounding in my chest. That only confirmed my suspicions. My mind raced, trying to put the pieces together. I told the officer what I could, my voice shaky but trying to remain clear, explaining my location and how to get where I was. The man outside started getting impatient. His pace quickened, and he started looking around, his head turning like he was trying to find a way to get into my car. It was absolutely terrifying, sitting helplessly in my tiny car with this likely dangerous man outside, and only a thin window between us. I kept trying to get the engine running, twisting the key, pumping the gas, praying for it to work, for my car to roar to life. He then started reaching into his pockets, fumbling for something. I could see the panic in his face when he could not find whatever he was looking for. He paused for a moment, then, in a sudden burst of rage, he punched the window a few times, a dull thud against the glass, trying to break it. When it did not shatter, he ran back to the side of the house, disappearing around the corner, like he was going to get something. 2 minutes passed as I sat there, my mind racing, trying to decide whether to wait for the police or to abandon my car and try to make a run for it on foot through the snow. Then, I saw the flickering blue and red lights in my rearview mirror, a beacon of hope in the darkness. At the exact same time, the man showed up on the side of the house again, holding something glinting in his right hand. He saw the police lights. He instantly took off, sprinting away from the house and into the woods, disappearing into the dense tree line. I'm sure it does not need too much explaining as to what happened that night. The police apprehended him a short while later. It turned out the man did not live there at all. The actual owners were gone for the holidays, out of town, which explained the empty house. The man had plugged in their elaborate outdoor decorations into an outlet outside the house, presumably to make it look like they were home, a sinister ruse. While I was on the porch, waiting for an answer, he had tampered with something outside my car to keep it from turning on. I am not a car person, so honestly, I did not really understand the specifics of what he had done, but it was enough to disable my vehicle. It seemed most likely that the man planned to kidnap me. Out of sheer luck, he must have dropped his knife or whatever tool he needed to break the window when he initially started searching his pockets. So, that is what he ran back to get from the side of the house. Nothing is for certain, of course, but that seems like the most likely case. The officers agreed. Anyway, I stopped doing deliveries after that night. The memory of being trapped, the silent approach, the chilling voice, and the glint of the tool in his hand, it was all too much. I could not shake the feeling of vulnerability. It forever changed the way I viewed being alone on isolated roads at night. It was a pretty typical night in the middle of March. I worked at a gas station at the time. Usually, I did afternoon shifts, which were busy but predictable. But every once in a while, I would cover for someone's overnight shift, which was always an adventure in boredom. This particular night, I had gotten a call in the morning, asking if I could come in from 10 o'clock at night to 8 o'clock in the morning. All of those hours would count as overtime, and the extra money was a strong motivator, so I quickly agreed. I got in and took over for the manager who was just finishing up his shift, then settled myself behind the front counter. It was pouring outside. The rain was coming down in sheets, drumming loudly against the roof of the station. Supposedly, a big storm was going to roll in later that night, bringing with it heavy winds and possibly thunder. The bad weather seemed to keep most people at home because the gas station was dead. It was eerily quiet, the only sound the steady downpour. After sitting inside for an hour, doing nothing but staring at the rain-streaked windows, I realized I should prepare the station for the storm. I threw on my bright yellow raincoat and ran outside. There were a bunch of loose things hanging around the pumps, signs, small buckets, and other miscellaneous items that needed to be brought inside so they would not be blown away. I started picking them up and running back and forth, quickly dropping them off inside the entrance. As I was grabbing the last few items near the edge of the property, I noticed a man not too far away from the gas station. He was on the side of the street, pacing around, completely drenched by the relentless rain. It was a very unusual sight. Even with the storm coming in, no one in their right mind would be just walking around in this weather. It looked like he was probably just waiting for a ride, perhaps for a bus or a taxi, though no vehicles were in sight. I finished up quickly, hurried inside, and secured the door. 2 hours later, the distant rumble of thunder started. It was a low, deep growl in the sky, growing steadily closer. Soon after, heavy winds began to buffet the building. The rain intensified, turning into an even harsher downpour that lashed against the windows. I knew it would be bad, but this was insane. The wind smacking against the sides of the building was actually making the whole room shake. It was a terrifying force. At one point, I even thought the front doors were going to snap off their hinges because they swung open so fast from a particularly strong gust. I hurried over and secured the bolt lock to keep them firmly in place, then moved toward the back of the building. I went into the storage room, a windowless space, away from all the vulnerable glass, and I just waited for the worst of the storm to pass. I want to say it was maybe 30 minutes after the storm had truly started. I was still huddled in the back of the building, listening to the cacophony outside, the howling wind, the torrential rain, the rumbling thunder. Through all the harsh noises, I heard a muffled sound. It was faint, almost imperceptible at first. It was not until I heard it multiple times that I realized what it was. Someone was banging on the front doors, a steady, insistent thudding. I left the storage room, my heart pounding, and looked down the sales floor. There was someone outside, a dark figure looking in at me, hitting the doors repeatedly. I hurried over and unlocked it, thinking he was in trouble and desperately needed help. He quickly ran inside, and I closed and locked the doors behind him, securing the bolt once more. The man was soaking wet. Water drained in pools from his jacket, spilling onto the floor in dark puddles. He did not stop to thank me or explain himself. He just kept walking back and forth, pacing across the floor of the gas station. It was the same man I had seen outside earlier, the one who was pacing in the rain. My mind raced. Had he been out there the whole time? It had been over 2 hours since I had seen him. The thought sent a chill down my spine, a cold knot forming in my stomach. I tried asking if he was okay, and if he needed me to call for help, my voice a little hesitant. But the man just kept pacing the floor, ignoring me completely. His eyes held this blank, hollow look, as if he was seeing something far away, something I could not comprehend. After watching him for a minute, the situation grew really uncomfortable. My initial concern quickly turned to unease, and then to outright fear. I started to walk to the front desk, reaching for the phone to call the police. As I picked up the phone, though, his eyes snapped at me. The blankness was gone, replaced by an unsettling intensity. He stopped walking instantly. It was then, as we looked at each other, that I noticed his hands. They were cut, right on the knuckles. They were bloody and bruised, a stark contrast to his otherwise passive demeanor. I caught myself looking for too long. My gaze had lingered on his hands for a beat too long, and by the time I looked back up at the man's eyes, I could tell he was pissed. "Don't," he said. His voice was low, rough, and utterly devoid of emotion, clearly talking about me using the phone. I was not trying to test him. I slowly, deliberately lowered the phone, placing it back on the receiver. There were a couple of seconds where he just stared at me, his eyes piercing, like he was thinking about whether or not to do something, whether to act on his anger. But then, he turned and continued to pace the floor, resuming his strange, silent ritual. The storm picked up outside, chaotically shaking the entire building. The wind howled like a banshee, adding to the horror of whatever was happening inside. I tried to think through all my options as this strange man walked around, just feet from me. I could try running, but I would have to get the door unlocked and outrun him in the middle of a raging storm. which seemed incredibly risky. I could also try calling the police discreetly, hoping he would just leave, but that was also risky, especially since he already seemed to know I was considering it. Finally enough, I ended up choosing probably the most risky option, which was to do nothing and just wait. I stood there and watched him for, I do not know, at least 20 minutes. It felt like an eternity. At any point, he could have just snapped and ended me, but he did not. After those 20 agonizing minutes, he gave me one last unsettling look. Then he walked over to the front door, slid the bolt lock over, and walked out into the storm, disappearing into the torrential rain and howling wind. The moment he was gone, I immediately called the police. I'm not sure if it was just because of the storm or because they did not think it was urgent enough, but it took over a half hour for a police officer to show up. By then, whoever the hell that man was, he was long gone. They never found him. When the storm finally passed, on the following day, there was a report filed for a missing woman. She had never returned home from work that night after leaving her office at 11 o'clock in the evening. Maybe I am disconnecting completely different things, but the timeline seemed to add up. The man had clear signs of having attacked someone with blood and bruises on his knuckles. It's all just theories, of course, but whatever I was in the middle of that night, I have not been able to stop thinking about it. The image of his blank eyes, the bloody knuckles, and the chilling silence still haunt my thoughts, a constant reminder of the darkness that can lurk just beneath the surface of an ordinary night. Last fall, I turned 16 and started my first job. It was at a really small pizza place in my town, a spot called Mamma Mia's. It was a family-owned shop, and there were only 5 or 6 people working there at any given time, mostly high school kids. I only got the job because my best friend, Maya, also worked there, and she put in a good word for me. My main role was the delivery driver, and I only worked during the later hours since I had school during the day. It was around my 3rd week on the job that this particular incident happened. The night was pretty regular. It was slow, both for deliveries and for dining in. The usual dinner rush had come and gone, leaving behind a quiet hum in the kitchen. It was slightly cold out too, a crisp autumn chill that kept most people at home, preferring to stay warm indoors. Around 11 o'clock though, a call came in. Maya picked up the phone and quickly put the order into the system. It was for a small pizza and a soda, a simple, quick order. They quickly made it, sliding the pizza into the oven, then boxing it up. I grabbed the bag, put it in my delivery bag, and hit the road to deliver it. The address was not too far, just about 8 minutes away, in an older part of town I did not know very well. But when I pulled onto the street that the address was on, I immediately hit a pothole, sending a jarring jolt through my car. I realized that the whole street was cracked and full of potholes. It looked torn apart, neglected, and completely uncared for, almost like a forgotten road. Our town was not exactly the nicest, with its share of rough patches, but this street was still far worse than most other places I had seen. I carefully drove down the road, slowing my pace, weaving back and forth to avoid any potholes I could see, until I made it to the address. It was a 2-story wooden house. The house itself looked just as old and uncared for as the street it stood on. The paint was peeling, and some of the wooden planks looked rotten. But strangely, the yard around the house was full of fresh flowers and plants that clearly had been tended to recently. Bright colors bloomed in stark contrast to the dilapidated house, a strange splash of life amidst the decay. I parked at the bottom of the long, overgrown driveway and grabbed the pizza and soda. Then I walked up to the front door. The wooden steps to the porch felt soft and creaky under my feet, like they were going to give out at any moment. As I stepped onto the porch, I got a weird, unsettling sense of something being off, a cold feeling that had nothing to do with the night air. I glanced back at my car. Behind it, the dense woods loomed, dark and silent, making me realize just how isolated this place felt. The nearest street light was a good distance away, and the dim glow did little to pierce the heavy shadows cast by the tall trees. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the strange feeling, and knocked on the door. Right after knocking, I could hear movement inside the house. Floorboards started creaking softly, a slow, deliberate sound. It was subtle, like someone was walking very lightly and slowly, trying not to make much noise. But I could hear the creaking get closer and closer to the other side of the door, each creak bringing them nearer until they were right behind it. I prepared myself for them to open the door. I put a friendly smile on my face, a standard customer service gesture, and held out the pizza, but they never opened it. The silence returned, thick and heavy, broken only by the faint creaking of the old house. After what felt like 10 seconds, the silence stretching uncomfortably, I started getting really uncomfortable. My smile felt strained. "Hello?" I called out, my voice a little hesitant. "I'm the pizza guy, just delivering your order." There was no response. No other sounds came from inside the house. Just the profound, unnatural quiet. I could feel something off, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. So, I backed up slowly, taking a few steps off the porch and onto the shaky wooden steps. I was still a little hesitant about fully leaving without them paying, or at least confirming they got the order. I took one last look back at the house, a final assessment of the strange situation. When I did, I physically felt my body shudder, a full body shiver that was not from the cold. There was a man standing by the side of the house, partially hidden by the overgrown bushes, staring right at me. He looked like he was walking toward me, his movements slow but purposeful, and I had only just stopped once I saw him. He looked old and skinny, his frame thin beneath his clothes, but he had an eerie, unsettling look in his eyes, even from that distance. His gaze was fixed on me, intense and unblinking. A wave of pure panic washed over me. I hurried back into my car, fumbling with the keys, my hands shaking. The man did not say a word, did not yell or try to stop me. He just watched me, his eerie gaze following my every move until I was safely inside my vehicle. I pulled out of there as fast as I could, reversing quickly down the long driveway and then speeding away down the broken, pothole-ridden street. I did not know what that was. I called Maya as soon as I was far enough away, my voice still trembling. She thought it might have been some kind of prank, maybe some older kids trying to scare me. But that man looked like he was way too old to be pulling something like that. His eyes had held a different kind of intent, a chilling seriousness. I am just glad I left when I did, without pushing the issue any further, because I honestly do not know what would have happened if that man had made it to the porch before I got out of there. The image of him standing there, silent and watchful, still flashes in my mind from time to time, a stark reminder of the strange, unsettling encounter on Blossom Lane. I always wonder what his intentions truly were. This was only a month ago. It was late September, and where I am, we were having a lot of rain. Pretty much every single day, it was pouring down, turning the city streets into glistening rivers and painting the sky a perpetual shade of gray. I work as an outdoor security guard for a large warehouse complex on the outskirts of the city, so rain does not exactly make my job any more enjoyable. Normally, I would be patrolling the perimeter, walking the grounds, and checking various entry points. But in conditions like these, that was out of the question. Luckily, the company I work for lets me stay inside on rainy nights, a small comfort. But it always made the shift go by a lot slower. Instead of getting to roam around outside the building, staying active and alert, I just had to stand by the huge glass entrance doors and watch for anything suspicious, my eyes scanning the rain-soaked darkness beyond. Anyway, this particular night, I got in at 9 o'clock. The last of the employees were clocking out, their tired faces illuminated by the harsh fluorescent lights. I locked up the place after they all left, securing all the main doors. It was pouring outside, a torrential downpour, so I stayed in as instructed and stood by the door. Honestly, I just tried to stay awake. There was nothing to see except the sheets of rain cascading down the glass and the occasional flash of thunder and lightning, illuminating the dark parking lot. A few hours went by in a slow, monotonous crawl. During that time, I just leaned against the wall, sipping lukewarm coffee, and made a few trips to the bathroom, trying to break up the endless vigil. But then, as I stood by the entrance doors, fighting to stay awake, my mind drifting into a haze of boredom, there was a deep creaking sound, followed by a thud. It was distinct, reverberating through the entire warehouse, a massive, cavernous space that usually hummed with the quiet of dormant machinery. It sounded like bending metal, perhaps a heavy metal door scraping open against a concrete floor. It was enough to make the hair stand up on the back of my neck. My heart gave a little jump, pulling me instantly out of my semi-sleep state. I was sure it was nothing, just a creepy sound because of the circumstances, the storm, and the emptiness of the building. But it was kind of my job to check on these things, to investigate any unusual noises. So, I pushed myself off the wall and started walking down the main hallway. It was long and wide, branching off into several corridors. I had never actually explored much of the warehouse since I was usually assigned to outdoor duties. All I knew of was this one main hallway that had 5 or 6 corridors branching from it, leading to large, open warehouse areas filled with tall shelving units and stacks of inventory. I looked down each of these, peering into the darkness, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom, until I got to the last one at the very end of the hallway. The door was cracked open. I felt a sudden cold chill run through me, a primal sense of dread. Even though I still did not know if it was already opened or not, my gut told me it was not. I walked over, my footsteps slow and deliberate, and pushed it open further. The whole room was dark, a vast black expanse that seemed to swallow the light from the hallway. Hello? My voice echoed through the otherwise silent warehouse, a weak attempt to pierce the darkness. The sound of my own voice seemed to be absorbed by the emptiness, returning no echo. After a few seconds, with no response, I started to step back, ready to close the door and report a potential breach. But then, I heard something in front of me, from deep within the darkness of the room. It was a voice. It sounded like a man, either mumbling to himself or softly laughing, a low, guttural sound that seemed to float from somewhere in the darkness, near the tall shelving units that stretched up into the unseen ceiling. It was too soft to make out words, just an indistinct, unsettling murmur. "Is someone there?" I called out, my voice a little louder this time, trying to project confidence I did not feel. "What the hell are you doing here?" I demanded. A pause. Then, clearer this time, "Come here." He said something else, softly, too quiet to hear. "What?" I asked, my heart beginning to pound. "Come here," he said again, a little louder, a distinct invitation that felt more like a command. Still, I could not see anything at all. The darkness in that room was absolute. My flashlight, even if I had remembered to bring it, would barely penetrate that kind of blackness. After a couple more agonizing seconds, the unsettling feeling becoming unbearable, I made a decision. I said nothing else, but quickly and firmly closed the door, shutting out the dark room and the unsettling voice. I used my radio to contact the police, my voice a little shaky as I relayed the information. Then, without a second thought, I left the building through the front doors, not wanting to be anywhere near that place. 5 minutes later, police cars arrived, their flashing lights slicing through the rain. Officers, their raincoats glistening, walked through the building, their flashlights cutting through the interior darkness. They came out alone, confirming my initial fear that the man was gone. The security tapes were later revealed. They showed what looked like a man, appearing to be in his 50s, wearing a dark jacket, slipping in through a gap in one of the back garage doors. He had obviously found a way to bypass the external cameras and alarms. From there, he made his way into the warehouse room where I heard him. And disturbingly, on the footage, it looked like he was holding some kind of knife, a glint of metal in his hand as he moved through the shadows. He made his exit soon after I left, vanishing as quickly as he appeared. We do not know why he broke in, or what exactly he was trying to do by telling me to come into the warehouse. The police had no answers, no clear motive. It might sound weak of me, but I quit after that. The memory of that voice and the chilling discovery of the knife on the footage was too much. I took up a day job instead, preferring the mundane predictability of daylight hours over the unsettling mysteries of the night. The thought of what could have happened, of walking further into that darkness toward a hidden man with a knife, still haunts me. I can still hear that soft, eerie whisper, inviting me into the unknown. 4 years ago, in late October, I picked up a new job at a gas station convenience store called the Quick Stop. It was a decent place, nothing fancy, but it paid the bills. My friends were throwing a big Halloween party on the 31st, a huge, anticipated event. But because of when I got hired, I did not have any vacation time built up. So, unfortunately, I had to work that night. At least I had most of the day to hand out candy to the trick-or-treaters and watch some classic spooky movies, a small consolation. I went into work at 8 o'clock in the evening. The streets were pretty quiet, at least of cars, since kids were running around trick-or-treating, their costumes a blur of color under the streetlights. So, I hoped the gas station would not be too busy. Thankfully, I got what I wished for. Only a couple dozen cars came in during my first hour, mostly parents grabbing last-minute snacks or gas before heading home. Once it got closer to 10 o'clock, even fewer vehicles were coming by. The roads themselves were not busy at all. I kept seeing a police car patrolling the main road every 15 minutes or so, its lights flashing silently as it passed. But aside from that, it was dead outside, a strange calm for Halloween night. I was fine with it being slow, the quiet allowing me to catch up on some tasks. But scrolling through my phone and seeing everyone else having fun at the Halloween party, their photos and videos flooding my feed, was a little depressing. So, to keep my mind occupied, I grabbed some boxes from the back, full of various items, to refill the shelves. Another little while passed. I was kneeling down, my back to the front door, restocking the candy aisle when I heard the little bell above the entrance go off, signaling a customer had entered. I turned around and saw 3 men walking into the shop. They were all wearing Halloween costumes, full costumes with masks and everything. One of them was dressed up as Michael Myers, the iconic slasher character, complete with his pale mask and dark overalls. But the other 2 I did not recognize. They were probably some other typical Halloween characters, maybe a generic monster or a clown. I could tell immediately they were not kids though. They were grown adults. One of them even had a long, scraggly beard sticking out from under his mask, and I could see tattoos going up his neck. They seemed large, bulky figures. I greeted them with a polite, "Welcome to the Quick Stop," but aside from a quick, unsettling glance in my direction, they did not acknowledge me. Maybe they were just trying to be in character or something. I do not know, but it was already weird that they kept the masks on. Most adults, even on Halloween, would take them off inside a store. I left the aisle and went around to the checkout counter, standing behind it while I waited for them to grab what they needed. I noticed there were not any cars outside though, which explained why I did not hear them pull in. That struck me as odd. Where had they parked? I watched them look around for a minute at the candy aisle. They seemed to be taking their time, scanning the shelves. Then, they picked up a single small bag of Dum Dum lollipops, the kind kids love, and tossed them onto the counter. "Find everything you needed?" I asked, trying to sound friendly. They did not say anything, just stood there, silently. I rang it up and told them the total. They paid in cash, a crumpled $20 bill. As I was doing the transaction, though, I could not help but notice one of them, the one standing slightly in the back, staring at me through his mask. I could only see his eyes through the eye holes, but they were locked on me and looked frustrated or angry or something. It made me really uncomfortable, a cold prickling sensation on my skin. I finished up the transaction, gave them their change, and told them to have a good night. There was a pause, a tense, silent moment that stretched into an eternity. Then, one of the men, the one nearest the front door, walked up to it and pulled down the bolt lock, sealing us inside. My stomach dropped. The one that had been staring at me then immediately came around the counter and shoved me onto the ground. I fell hard, the air knocked out of me. I tried to stay calm, my voice a desperate whisper. "Take the money," I pleaded. "I won't stop you." However, the other man walked around the counter and right past the register, completely ignoring the cash drawer. My heart sank. They were not here for the money. He forced the zip ties around my hands, pulling them tight, and then lifted me onto my feet. I was completely helpless, my arms bound, my legs unsteady. They dragged me through the store, my feet stumbling. After briefly checking outside through the front windows to ensure the coast was clear, they rushed me out the entrance. It was only as they dragged me toward the side of the building that I noticed an old, beat-up car sitting in the grass just outside the parking lot, hidden from the main road. It was dark, a nondescript sedan that looked like it had seen better days. As we reached the edge of the parking lot, though, a sudden, glaring light came over top of us. It was a police car, its headlights cutting through the darkness, pulling directly into the lot. The three men immediately dropped me on the cold pavement. My bound hands hit the ground hard. They sprinted into their car, fumbling with the doors. I do not know if it just was that their car would not start, or if they just gave up, but the officers were able to get to them before they got away. Backup showed up not even 30 seconds later, sirens wailing, more flashing lights filling the parking lot. I guess what happened was earlier in the night. The police had gotten a report of three men in costumes, offering kids candy on the sidewalks and trying to lead them away from houses, promising them more treats in their car. That is why I kept seeing a patrol car circling the area. They had been looking for these exact men. What they wanted to do with me or with any of the kids is not for sure, as none of the men confessed anything to the police. They remained silent, offering no explanation. It almost makes me glad that everything happened the way it did, though, because if I had sold them that candy and heard later on that it was used to kidnap kids with, I probably would have felt a ton of guilt, a heavy burden on my conscience. Thankfully, it did not have to go that way. I was incredibly lucky. The thought of what could have happened, of what their true intentions were, still sends a shiver down my spine. The masks, the silence, the sudden violence, it was a Halloween night I will never forget. I was on my way to deliver an order from the sandwich shop I worked for. It was a quiet night, around 11 o'clock or so, the kind of night where the world seemed to hold its breath. I had my music playing softly in my car, just running through the motions of the delivery. It was a routine I knew well, a familiar path that rarely offered surprises. My mind was already halfway to the next task, enjoying the brief solitude of the drive. On my way to their neighborhood, I pulled up to a red light. There was nobody else at the intersection, just me and the soft glow of the traffic signal. But for some reason, the light stayed red for what felt like an abnormal amount of time, stretching on and on. As I sat there and stared at the unmoving light, waiting for it to change, a car pulled up beside me. It was a sudden, silent appearance. I only glanced over for a second, not wanting to make that awkward eye contact that often happens at stoplights. But their windows were heavily tinted, definitely more than what was legal. I could not see a single thing through them, not even a vague outline of a person inside. The car itself was black as well, a dark, nondescript vehicle, maybe an old Toyota or something similar. I cannot really pinpoint what it was, but I got a really uneasy feeling about them. It could have just been that we were the only two on the road at that late hour, creating an unusual sense of focus. I'm really not sure. Eventually, the light turned green, and I started going, pulling away from the intersection. I did not get very far, though, before noticing they had not moved. They were still parked at the intersection, motionless. Once I got further down the road, I shrugged it off and just thought it was weird and nothing else. Just a strange coincidence. A couple of minutes later, I pulled off into the section of housing that the delivery was in. I would say neighborhood, but it was not really a neighborhood. It was just a line of 10 or so houses leading to a dead end. Something about it seemed really off-putting. The houses were all perfectly spaced, identical in design, but utterly devoid of any life. Of all the houses on the street, not a single one had a light on. It was completely dark, save for the weak glow from my headlights and the distant streetlights back on the main road. I 100% would have thought these places were abandoned, if not for the fact that the houses themselves looked really nice. They looked like ordinary, well-kept neighborhood homes, newly built, with not a single sign of anything wrong with them, no overgrown lawns or peeling paint. I figured it had to just be a coincidence that every resident down the street had their lights off. Perhaps everyone was out for the evening. Anyway, the address I had was for the second to last house. I pulled up and parked on the curb, the silence of the street pressing in on me. I got out with the order and walked up to the door. I was hoping I would at least see some sort of light coming through the windows of this house, because it was the one I was delivering to, and it seemed unusual for the residents to be living in complete darkness. But standing on the porch, I did not see any light at all. Reluctantly, I knocked on the door. A soft rap. When I did, the door swung a bit from its hinges, a slight creak. It was like it was not properly shut or locked, just resting in its frame. This was even more odd. Sandwich delivery. Anyone home? I called out into the darkness of the house. It was completely silent. No response. Not even the slightest sound from inside the house. The air felt heavy, stagnant. I was going to leave, convinced this was some kind of mistake or prank. But just to be sure, I did not miss anything. I cracked the door open a little further. I could see a hallway stretching out before me, and a room branching off to the side. Both were empty of any furniture or decorations, not even a single picture on the wall. The house felt hollow, eerily devoid of any personal touches. It only took a few seconds before dust started coming through the doorway too, floating lazily in the sliver of light I provided. It was an old, stale smell. I shut it quickly, a sudden sense of alarm washing over me, and backed up from the porch. I was very confused and slightly worried. This was not a normal delivery. As I walked back down to my car, though, my eyes scanned the deserted street. I noticed something down the road, a few houses back. There was a small black car. It was not there when I had pulled in. Its headlights were off, and it was parked in the shadows, almost completely invisible against the dark houses. Once I saw the heavily tinted windows, I immediately recognized it. It was the same car from the red light, the one that had made me uneasy. I felt my face go white. Knowing this could not possibly be a coincidence at this point, a cold dread settled deep in my stomach. I started to hurry to my car, my steps quickening into a frantic walk. But as I got just a few feet away from the road, I saw something move in the reflection of one of the car windows. It was a fleeting movement, a dark shape against the glass. I was not sure what it was that I saw, but I stopped in place, my body freezing with a sudden wave of fear. I was standing near the passenger door, and through the window, my eyes fell on the back seat. It was dark, but there was something blocking the back window, a dark mass. It only took me about a second for me to realize what I saw. It was a person, crouched down low, hidden in the back seat, waiting. I turned and bolted back to the house, my legs pumping, fueled by pure adrenaline. As I did, the back door to my car swung open, and a man in a black hoodie and black pants came running out. He did not chase me, though. He ran straight down to the road and into his car, the black sedan. I stayed on the porch, my heart pounding violently against my ribs, and with shaking hands, I dialed 911. I probably could have gotten in my car and left at that point, but I was too scared to really think straight. My mind was a whirlwind of panic. The police arrived quickly and immediately told me that this whole street was unoccupied. The homes were new builds, still waiting to be sold. Guess that explained why I thought they looked so nice and not abandoned, but it did not explain the delivery order. What I definitely did not expect was to hear them say that they had had multiple reports this past week, very similar to mine. The guy would order something for delivery with a fake name and address, then follow the driver to these empty houses. What happened to me was the closest call of any of them, though. The guy had snuck inside my car and was waiting for me to get in, maybe even drive away. Who knows what he was trying to do? Unfortunately, there have not been any updates on finding him. The police said he left no real traces, a phantom of the empty houses. The memory still gives me chills. Every time I see a car with tinted windows, I am instantly transported back to that terrifying moment. I was pretty young when this happened. I think I was 16 or 17. It was at my first job, which was just some trashy pizza place in a strip mall. It was nothing special, definitely not a fancy restaurant. They paid slightly more than other places, and I made extra from tips when I did deliveries. So I stayed there for a while, saving up for college. I do not remember too much about the beginning of my shift this night. I probably started at my regular time, around 6 o'clock in the evening, and was scheduled until midnight. But the whole first half of my shift went by like any other day. a blur of taking orders and making pizzas. It was sometime around 10 o'clock that we got an order for delivery. The address was a bit outside our usual delivery zone, but it was a quiet night, so my boss said it was fine. I packed it up and left to drop it off. The place was about 15 minutes away, in a small, older neighborhood with winding roads and mature trees. It took me a minute to find the house though, because a lot of the overgrown trees were blocking the address numbers, making them impossible to see. And many of the homes had long, winding driveways leading far from the road, disappearing into the shadows. Eventually, I did find it after circling back a few times, my eyes scanning the mailboxes and obscured house numbers. I drove down the long driveway and parked closer to the home. It was one of those large, sprawling houses that looked like it was built forever ago, with dark, weathered wood and a slightly sagging roof. I got the food from my car and walked up to the front porch. It was hard not to notice how quiet it was in this neighborhood. It felt like I was so far away from everything, especially with the dense trees everywhere, creating a sense of isolation. The only sounds were the rustle of leaves in the faint breeze and the distant, almost imperceptible hum of the city. When I got up to the porch, though, a strange sight greeted me. The front door was wide open. I had seen a lot of people leave their doors cracked open before, maybe just a few inches, to let in some air or signal they were expecting someone. But the way this one was fully open was a little bit excessive. It was standing ajar by a good foot or more, revealing a dark interior. It seemed almost inviting, yet deeply unsettling. Anyway, I walked over, stepping onto the porch, and knelt down to set the food inside the house, just past the threshold, when a voice called out from within. "Hey, would you mind bringing the pizza in here? I'm just setting up the table." It was a man's voice, but it sounded friendly enough, a little gruff, but polite. I knew it was frowned upon to enter someone's home while delivering. Our company policy was strict about that for safety reasons. But honestly, it was a fairly normal request, especially for a late-night delivery. And usually, it did not take more than a few extra seconds and typically secured a good tip, something I was always aiming for. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to go against protocol. What was the harm? I stepped inside and walked down the short hallway into what I assumed was the kitchen. The house was dimly lit, but I could make out the shapes of rooms. I set the pizza box on what looked like a large kitchen table, but nobody else was in there. The room was empty. I had just heard his voice only moments ago, so clearly he was around somewhere. But I never heard him walk anywhere else. He did not seem to be moving. I also noticed the house was extremely quiet. Like no other sounds at all. No television, no radio, no sounds of people moving around, no clinking of dishes. Just a profound, unnatural silence that felt heavy in the air. I felt a shiver run through me, a sudden chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. My gut screamed at me that something was wrong. As I decided to leave, turning to walk back toward the front door, his voice called out again. "Can you bring it in here, please?" His voice came from the other hallway, a darker corridor connecting to the kitchen. There was a single door at the end of that hallway that was open, but whatever room was behind it was completely dark. There was no light on in there at all. It also sounded like his voice came from right behind the doorway, like he was standing just out of sight, waiting. A heavy feeling descended upon me. The request, innocent enough at first, now felt like a trap. The silence of the house, the unmoving man, the dark room. After a few agonizing seconds, my instinct screaming at me, I turned around. I did not say a word. I simply fast-walked, almost ran, back out the front door, leaving the pizza on the kitchen table. I got in my car and drove back to work, my heart pounding. I never said a word about it to my boss or my friend Maya. I thought I would either get made fun of for being scared or for being stupid for going inside in the first place, so I just kept it to myself. Thinking back on it now, though, years later, there was definitely something up with that guy. Nothing about that encounter was normal. Oh, the open door, the sudden silence inside, the request to come deeper into the house, and then that voice from the pitch-black room. I am just glad that at least I was smart enough to leave when I did, because there is really no saying what would have happened if I had gone into that dark room with him. The thought still sends a shiver down my spine. a chilling reminder of how close I might have come to something truly terrifying. I was 20 years old and worked with my parents at a really small takeout restaurant. It was a family business, and we specialized in to-go orders. Our little shop was known for its quick service and delicious portable meals. I was in college at the time and was on a very hectic schedule, balancing classes, assignments, and a social life. But my parents were kind enough to offer me a laid-back position, just as a general worker. Usually, I was working the takeout table, handling orders and payments, or cleaning up the place after closing hours. This was during early December, and with finals coming up, I did not have much time to work during the day, so I was taking up mostly late-night shifts where I would just clean for a few hours, then head home. It was quiet, and I could listen to music while I worked. One of the nights I was working, I noticed, around an hour into my shift, that a car was parked in the parking lot. The way our restaurant was laid out, it was a standalone shop with a tiny parking lot directly in front of it. There was no crossover between other stores or businesses. We were completely isolated. I thought whoever parked there probably just did not think anyone would care. Maybe they were waiting for someone from a nearby office building, and they were right, because I really did not care. It happened often enough. 20 or so minutes later, they left. I barely gave it a second thought. However, the very next night, around the same time, the car pulled into the parking lot again. This time, it was a bit more noticeable. The first time it was fine because I thought it was just a one-time thing, but coming back again was strange. It was a dark, isolated lot at night, not somewhere you would just casually park for no reason. I walked up to the front of the building and looked out. It was an older, faded gray sedan with dark, almost black windows. They did not seem to be trying to hide or anything because they were facing right at the building, and they kept their headlights on, illuminating the front of the restaurant. It felt like they were deliberately making their presence known. I double-checked that the doors were locked, pulling on them to make sure they were secure before getting back to cleaning. It was hard not to feel like they were watching me through the giant glass front windows, a strange sensation of being observed. But just like last time, they left not too long after, vanishing into the night. I finished up my work, wiped down the counters, and clocked out an hour later. As I walked to my car in the empty parking lot, I felt really uneasy. I knew they had left, but it was just concerning that the same car came by 2 nights in a row for seemingly no reason. I drove home, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach, and got some rest, pushing the strange encounters from my mind. Having a lot of schoolwork to do, I decided to take off the next night, focusing on my studies. So, I did not return to work until the following night. The whole time I was inside cleaning, I had this anxious feeling that made me constantly look out the window, expecting that car to come back at any point. I kept glancing up, scanning the empty lot, my heart giving a little flutter with every passing car on the main road. But I never saw them pull in. I was inside for nearly 3 hours, meticulously cleaning every surface, and finished everything I had to do. Not having seen the car come by this night, I felt like maybe it really was all nothing, just a couple of odd coincidences. I packed my stuff up and headed out, locking the door behind me with a firm click. As I walked through the parking lot, heading toward my car, that anxious and uneasy feeling rushed back to me. It hit me suddenly, like a cold wave, completely unbidden. It felt like I suddenly got a burst of adrenaline, making me sweat and look in all directions, my senses heightened. Then, as I was halfway across the parking lot and standing out in the open, my eyes spotted a car. It was sitting in the far back of the parking lot, away from all the street lamps that lit up the area, completely cloaked in shadow. It was the gray sedan. Within seconds, its engine roared to life, and it started moving quickly, driving directly toward me. Panic surged through me. I sprinted to my car, fumbling with my keys. I could hear their tires skidding on the pavement as they sped up, gaining on me. The car pulled up right beside me, close enough for me to feel its presence, and slammed on the brakes with a loud screech. I stumbled forward, thinking they were about to hit me. I was only a few feet away from my car at this point, my hand reaching for the door handle. Suddenly, the doors of their car swung open, revealing dark figures inside. I did not even turn my head to look, having my focus completely on getting into my own car. Footsteps rushed behind me, heavy and fast, just as I opened my car door and managed to get in. My hands were shaking violently as I tried to get my car to turn on, fumbling with the key in the ignition. The men started banging on the windows and trying to get the doors open, their muffled shouts filling the air. But I barely got it into drive. The engine sputtered, then roared to life. I slammed my foot on the accelerator and drove past them, narrowly missing their car as I swerved out of the parking lot and onto the main road. From there, I was safe. I called 911 the moment I felt a moment of calm and pulled into a well-lit gas station nearby to wait for them. Unfortunately, the outside of our shop did not have any cameras, so the information the police had to go off of was minimal. I could not even see any of the men's faces. They were obscured by masks or darkness. After that night, it is no surprise that I never saw the car or the men again. They vanished into the night, leaving behind only the chilling memory of their silent, relentless pursuit. I often wonder what their intentions were, what they wanted with me. The Phantom sedan remains a terrifying mystery, a stark reminder of the hidden dangers that can lurk in the dark, even in a seemingly empty parking lot. It was mid-January, and it was snowing every day here. The world outside my window was a constant blur of white flakes, and the temperatures had plummeted. I work from home, thankfully, so I did not have to deal with the awful weather too much, aside from going to the grocery store and whatnot. Some of the days, the snowfall was pretty bad, heavy and thick, accompanied by powerful gusts of wind that made the house creak. This particular day, I was in Zoom meetings all day for work, my laptop humming on my desk. But my internet connection was really poor, cutting in and out, not making for the best experience. Around 6 o'clock in the evening, my connection had cut out completely, and I ended up just having to call it a night from work, defeated by the unstable signal. The sun had already set by then, casting the world into a deep twilight, but I took my dog, Gracie, outside to use the bathroom really quick. Gracie was a medium-sized terrier mix, full of energy and usually quite brave. The wind was so cold, it was painful, biting at my exposed skin. But while I was out there, shivering, I noticed a person standing near the road at the edge of my property. They were just standing there, perfectly still, not doing anything, which is fine, but also very strange in this kind of weather. It was too cold to simply be out for a stroll. I did not stay out there long enough to really think about it though. I hurried inside, pulling Gracie with me, and warmed up, drying my dog's paws off and bundling up under some blankets on the couch. I turned on the news to play in the background, just in case there were any major updates or possible blizzards coming in, hoping for some distraction. Only a few minutes went by when my dog suddenly perked up. Her ears swiveled and her head tilted, listening intently. A few moments later, she began growling, a low, guttural sound, her eyes fixed on the front door. I did not have any curtains open, so I could not see outside, but Gracie's reaction instantly put me on edge. I got up from the couch and walked over to the door, my heart starting to pick up its pace. There was a guy walking around outside my front patio. I could see their shoe prints in the fresh snow, going back and forth, as if they had been walking around for a couple of minutes already. He went back and forth again before walking to the side of the house and disappearing from my view. After about a minute, when he did not reappear, I went back to the couch. My dog Gracie was laying down again and did not seem alarmed anymore, her tail relaxed. I was not really sure what to think about that guy walking around outside my house. It was odd for sure, very out of place, but enough to call the police over? Probably not. I just kept an eye on Gracie, figuring she would be my early warning system if he reappeared. The rest of that night, though, there was not anything else. I took Gracie out one more time around 10 o'clock, and it was even colder and snowier outside, so surely nobody could be out here anymore. The thought was a comfort. I then went upstairs to my bedroom and got ready for bed, then hopped in and fell asleep. Actually, I'm not really sure if I had fallen asleep yet or was just about to, but I remember opening my eyes to seeing Gracie standing at the bedroom door. She was just staring at the door, her head perked up, her body rigid, and her tail tucked under her legs. She was completely still, like a statue. I whispered her name, trying to call her over to the bed, but she did not move. Gracie had always been nervous about strangers, but she had never acted like this inside our home. She was usually bold indoors, so I knew something was definitely up. A cold dread began to creep over me. I threw the covers off me and got out of bed quietly, not wanting to make a sound. I walked to the door and put my ear against it to listen. I do not know what I expected to hear, but it was quiet. Too quiet. The house felt absolutely silent, holding its breath. I put my hand on the doorknob, about to unlock and open it, thinking maybe I was just being paranoid. When someone on the other side twisted the handle, my hand froze. I stared in fear as it slowly moved back and forth, a deliberate, slow turning. Someone was on the other side, trying to open the door, and I was just moments away from unlocking it. My heart pounded faster and faster, a frantic drumbeat in my chest. At first, I tried to stay quiet, hoping they would think the room was empty. But as the person started to get more aggressive with trying to open the door, twisting the handle harder, I realized they already knew I was in that room. Panic surged through me. I ran to the bed, grabbing my phone and dialing 911 as I tried to look for some kind of weapon to defend myself with, my eyes darting around the room. It seemed like after I started moving around, though, the person fell quiet. They stopped trying to open the door and stopped moving in the hallway. Still, I grabbed my heavy clothing iron from the closet, a clumsy but solid weapon, and proceeded to tell the operator that I needed help, my voice a frantic whisper. I want to say I waited 10 minutes for police to arrive, though it felt like an eternity. They came in, their footsteps heavy on the stairs, and found no one else inside. The front door was wide open though, probably picked, and snowy boot prints were all over the hallways, leading from the front door up the stairs and to my bedroom. They had no intent on stealing anything. No valuables were disturbed. They were just looking for me. Unfortunately, that's where the trail ends. The guy came and left with no other traces. He was gone before the police arrived. I do not think I would even be able to sleep at night if not for Gracie watching my back. Her instinct saved my life. I still check the doorknob every night, and Gracie sleeps at the foot of my bed, her presence a constant, comforting reminder that I am not alone. It was the day before Christmas Eve, and I had hopped in my car to do a few deliveries for a service like DoorDash. I was hoping the holiday season would bring in some better tips, knowing people were often more generous around this time of year. It was around 11 o'clock at night when I got this particular order. It was a normal one, just a single bag of food to drop off at their house. Most of my previous orders that night were actually grocery deliveries, probably because stores would be closing up for the next 2 days, and people were stocking up. The address on this one was far though, farther than I would usually be willing to drive for a small order. But with not many other orders coming through, I took it anyway, eager for the income. It was lightly snowing outside, the flakes drifting gently from the sky, and the roads were very quiet, almost deserted. This made the drive peaceful, a serene journey through the winter night. The car hummed along, and I enjoyed the calm. The house was not in an average neighborhood, though. When I pulled up to what I thought was going to be the entrance to a subdivision, it was actually just a thin, unpaved path through the dense trees, with a small cabin looking home at the end. It was incredibly isolated, nestled deep in the woods. I pulled down the path and parked, getting out with the bag of food. I walked up to the door and gave it a few knocks. Immediately, I could hear a loud chatter from inside. It sounded like a group of people, many voices, laughing and talking over each other, a cacophony of festive sounds. It sounded like so many people. I was actually confused on how they could all fit in such a small cabin. It seemed physically impossible. There was also something strange about the way it sounded, a quality that just did not seem right. Something was off about the unnatural liveliness. Then the door opened. A man stood in front of me. The contrast to what I expected had me put off for a second. He was a tall man with a polite, if somewhat forced, smile. But behind him, The inside of the house was still and motionless. Nobody was running around. Most of the lights were not even on, leaving the interior in a dim, eerie twilight. And yet, the sound of a huge holiday party, complete with laughter and loud conversation, was coming from a small room at the very end of the hallway, a room that should not have been able to contain such a crowd. The man's smile widened slightly. "Why don't you come bring the food inside?" he said, his voice smooth. "They'll be happy to see you." That was an odd thing to say. It immediately put me on edge. I began stuttering, trying to say no and make up an excuse, anything to avoid stepping further into that strange, silent house with its phantom party. But the man interrupted me before I could form a coherent sentence. "They just want to thank you for working during the holidays," he said, his smile unwavering. "You'll be glad you stopped by." All the while he was saying these strange and honestly creepy things, the loud chatter from the back of the cabin continued, a disembodied chorus of celebration. And then it suddenly cut out, just like that. The cabin was quiet. The profound silence was immediate and absolute. It was like a recording or a tape had suddenly stopped playing. The abruptness was jarring. The man looked back for a moment, his smile faltering, clearly not expecting that to happen. His eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise, or perhaps annoyance, crossing his face. And before he could do anything else, before he could recover, I dropped the bag of food on the porch. I did not care about the order, or the money, or the tip. My instinct screamed at me to run. I spun around and sprinted back to my car, fumbling with the keys, my heart pounding in my chest. I got in, locked the doors, and drove away as fast as I could, reversing quickly down the narrow, dark path and speeding onto the main road. I stopped doing deliveries for the night, right then and there. I did not take any more orders and just stayed home for the rest of the holidays, feeling unnerved. I know nothing actually happened at that cabin. I was not physically harmed, but it is how disturbingly strange everything was. The phantom sounds, the man's unsettling words, the abrupt silence, and the chilling thought of what could have happened if I had walked inside. That still freaks me out. The memory of that fake party and the man's chilling invitation lingers, a reminder of a very strange and unsettling Christmas Eve. It was the day after Christmas, and I worked at a small family-owned grocery store as an overnight stocker. The store was called Harvest Market, and it was known for its fresh produce and local goods. I am not even sure why I was scheduled this night. We had been closed for Christmas Day, and it was probably really slow during the day on the 26th, meaning there was not much for me to do as far as stocking shelves. I spent the first hour filling what little needed to be filled on the shelves, arranging cans and boxes, but then I kind of just wandered around, trying to find something to do to pass the time. The store was quiet, bathed in the soft hum of the refrigerators and the distant glow of the emergency lights. As I was walking past the front of the store, near the large glass windows, I noticed a person outside. They were unusually close to the building for this time of night, standing right up against the window, peering in. It looked like he was just walking around, perhaps curious, but he quickly noticed me looking at him. Instead of going away, he came even closer to the window, pressing his face against the glass. He did not say anything or try knocking. He just stared at me, his eyes unblinking, a strange, intense gaze. I felt really uneasy, a prickling sensation on my skin, and was not sure what to do. After a few seconds of him not looking away, his stare unwavering, I turned and walked away from the window, trying to play it off like I was not bothered. That was very strange, though. No normal person acts like that. It made my stomach knot. I waited a few minutes, giving him time to leave, before cautiously going back to the front of the store and looking out the window again. He was gone. I sighed in relief, the tension in my shoulders easing. Then, I continued walking around the store to pass the time, trying to forget about the odd encounter. I was just weaving in and out of the aisles, straightening up some of the shelves, making the store look neat and organized. Maybe 10 minutes had passed. I was at the back of the store, in the dry goods section, when I rounded the corner at the end of one of the aisles. I immediately stopped walking. My eyes widened. There were several large boxes that had fallen off the shelves and were scattered on the floor. They were not small things either, like a bag of chips that could have just tipped over. These were heavy, sturdy boxes full of canned goods. They had to have been knocked down or moved by someone with considerable force. Just as I was trying to process it, trying to come up with an explanation, I heard something from down the aisle, just beyond the fallen boxes. It was a soft but deep and eerie laugh, like a man quietly giggling, a low, unsettling sound that seemed to echo strangely in the quiet store. It almost sounded unnatural, like a grown adult giggling like a small child. A high-pitched, disturbing sound that made the hair stand up on my arms. Part of me, driven by a strange mix of fear and duty, thought about going to confront him, to demand to know who he was and what he was doing. But then I remembered the man I saw by the window. He was fairly big, a bulky figure, and could have had something hidden in their jacket, something dangerous. My blood ran cold. The image of his intense stare flashed in my mind. My instincts took over. I did not hesitate. I turned and ran to the front of the store, fumbling with the keys and out the doors into the cold night. I got in my car, my hands shaking, and immediately called the police. They pulled in 10 minutes later, their flashing lights illuminating the empty parking lot. We entered the store carefully. The man inside the store was gone. There was no trace of him. We later got hold of the security tapes. They showed him find a way in through a side door that had been inadvertently left ajar during the busy holiday season. A small oversight. And as he hid behind the aisle, laughing at me, he clearly held a knife in his hand. Some kind of small switchblade that glinted in the dim light. The police officers who reviewed the footage thought he was probably under the influence of something. Perhaps both drunk and on drugs, acting erratically. I do not disagree with that assessment, but I also do not think it changes anything. I could have died that night if things had gone any differently. The chilling laughter and the sight of that knife will forever be etched in my memory. The idea that someone was stalking me, then waiting inside, still sends shivers down my spine. I worked at a gas station for 2 years, starting in 2015. It was a typical, busy station on a major highway, open all night. During the winter of my first year, I had a regular customer come in a lot. I worked night shifts, so whenever anyone came in more than once, I would usually recognize them, especially if they were out on the road late. This guy was a trucker, and he told me his name was Paul. He drove a large box truck, usually stopping in for coffee and an energy drink. He was a really nice guy, friendly and talkative, but he definitely had something different about him. He was always smiley, like too smiley and happy, especially for it being the middle of the night. Sometimes I actually found it a little creepy, the way his smile seemed almost painted on. Anyway, one night, about halfway through my shift, he came in and he was acting differently. His usual cheerful demeanor was gone. He walked in and greeted me with a nod, but as he looked around the aisles, his face was dull and almost angry, a stark contrast to his usual beaming expression. His eyes seemed to hold a troubled, faraway look. He picked out an energy drink, the same brand he always got, and came up to the counter. As he approached, his face suddenly changed back to that overly happy, almost forced look. But I could see a deep, unsettling dread in his eyes, making his smile seem even more fake and almost disturbing in a way. It was a mask, thinly worn. He paid for his drink and walked out to his truck, then drove off, leaving me with a strange feeling. I had almost forgotten about it until the next day when I saw his truck pull in again, around the same time. It was pretty cold and snowy outside. The world outside glazed in white. When Paul came in, he had that same look as yesterday, that strained expression, except this time, he did not smile at all. His face was blank, serious. He grabbed a First Energy drink on the shelf, not even looking at the brand, and came up to the counter. As he paid, he started asking me questions, which was unusual for him. He asked how busy it was tonight and when my shift was over. Then, just before he left, he asked if I would not mind helping him lift something into his truck. Something heavy. Having known him for so long now and trying to be helpful, I agreed. I put on my jacket and followed him outside. The gas station was empty, aside from his truck parked on the far side of the lot, away from the pumps, almost hidden in the shadows. I followed him over there. He opened the passenger door of his large truck, then walked around to the driver's side and got in. "It's just right up here," he said, gesturing for me to get in as well, motioning towards the passenger seat. I climbed up into the truck cab and sat down. It was one of those big box trucks that had a door behind the seats for access to the cargo section, a heavy metal door that led to the dark interior of the truck. I looked at Paul. He had that strange wide smile again, plastered across his face, but his eyes were still dull, lifeless. "It's just right in there," he repeated, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I'll follow behind you." He pointed at the heavy door to the cargo section. I suddenly felt very unsettled. A cold dread washed over me, a primal instinct. I could sense that this was not what he said it was, that the request for help was a lie. I sat there, my mind racing, trying to figure out what to say or do, how to extract myself from this rapidly developing situation. And then I began to notice an odor. It was strong and disgusting, a sickening smell, like something rotting or decaying, coming from whatever the hell was behind that door. The smell intensified, gagging me. I looked back up at Paul. His face was tense, his jaw tight, but he held that smile and just watched me, waiting for me to move, his eyes unblinking. Without a second thought, my body reacted. I jumped back out of the truck, slamming the door behind me with a loud thud, and hurried back into the station, my heart pounding in my chest. He did not follow. As I was hurrying back, though, my ears strained against the wind, I thought I heard him yell, like a frustrated guttural yell coming from the truck. The howling wind covered most of the sound, making it indistinct. He pulled out of the gas station soon after, his truck rumbling, disappearing into the snowy night. I worked there for another year, and Paul never showed up again, not even once. I do not know what was back there, or what was really going on with Paul, but I think I was incredibly lucky to not have to find out. The memory of that putrid smell and Paul's fake smile with the dead eyes still sends a shiver down my spine. I am forever grateful I listened to my gut that night. My name is Trevor, and I am a freshman in college. I do not have a lot of bills to pay, as I am lucky to have a supportive family who covers most of my tuition and living expenses. However, I still have to pay for my own food and for whatever random activities that I want to do with my friends. So, I do Uber Eats every once in a while, just to make enough to afford these things. I drove an old beater, a faded blue Honda Accord that probably belonged in the scrapyard, rattling and wheezing. But it did the job, I guess, getting me from one place to another. Anyway, I had been delivering for a couple of hours on this particular day. It was about 10 o'clock at night when I picked up an order from Wendy's. There was nothing abnormal about it, at least from what I knew. A simple order for a burger and fries. I drove 15 minutes down the mostly empty highway, the road stretching out before me under the dim glow of the occasional streetlight. The turn was directly off the highway onto some gravel road. It led straight into a dense forest, and without any streetlights, it was very dark. An oppressive blackness that seemed to swallow my headlights. The headlights on my old Honda were really dim too, just weak yellow beams, which made it really difficult to drive down this unpaved road. All I could see was about 10 feet ahead of my car. The darkness beyond that an impenetrable wall. After a minute, the road stopped very suddenly. It just ended, abruptly, in a clearing filled with trees. I checked my Uber Eats app on my phone, and it showed that I had arrived at the destination. However, I did not see a house anywhere. There was nothing but trees. I stepped out of my car, feeling a surge of confusion, and took a few steps in front of my headlights, straining my eyes, trying to see if there was a hidden path or something, a faint trail leading to a house. I did not see anything. It was just woods and trees, a thick, dark expanse stretching in every direction. I started to wonder if maybe I had missed a turn somewhere along the gravel road, if the GPS had miscalculated. I turned back around, a sense of unease starting to prickle at me, and opened my car door. As I was getting in, my foot still on the ground, I spotted a light in the woods. It was just a small, dim light, a faint glow coming from between the trees, perhaps 50 feet into the darkness. It was not moving at all, which made me think it might be a porch light, or maybe a cabin tucked away in the depths of the forest. I walked a little bit closer, still holding the Wendy's bag, to try and see better, but it was not bright enough to show anything around it. Literally, all I could see was the light itself, a tiny, solitary beacon in the vast darkness. I stood there for a minute, awkwardly holding the Wendy's bag, unsure whether or not to walk up to it. My gut told me something was off. Then, it suddenly moved. The light, which had been perfectly still, shifted. It went behind one of the trees, disappearing from my sight. It either turned off completely, or just stayed hidden behind a thick trunk because it never showed back up. I was definitely unnerved. If this was the guy who ordered it, then what was he doing? Why was he hiding in the woods? It made no sense. I took a few steps back toward my car, my heart beginning to pound. And that's when I heard leaves crunching from directly in front of me, from the direction where the light had been. I could hear it getting closer, the dry leaves crackling underfoot, but still saw nothing aside from empty darkness among the trees. The sound was distinct, deliberate, and approaching. I dropped the bag of food, abandoning the delivery, and scrambled into my car, slamming the door shut. It took my stupid old car way too long to start, the engine sputtering and groaning, but when it finally did, I made a 3-point turn, my tires crunching on the gravel, and began driving back down the gravel road as fast as I could. As I did, I caught a glimpse of a man in the sight of my headlights. He was sprinting through the woods, moving incredibly fast, and heading right for the road, clearly trying to cut me off before I reached the highway. I luckily made it past him before he got in front of me because I honestly do not think my old car would have been able to stop or swerve out of the way in time. The rest of that gravel road felt eerily quiet, the only sound the crunch of my tires. When I got back to the highway, I ended my shift immediately and went straight back home, my adrenaline still pumping. I looked up that area on Google Maps later, and there were absolutely zero houses there. It was just some abandoned gravel road with a dead end. I did not know what I was in the middle of, or how many people were in the woods around me, but I know I am incredibly lucky to have gotten away from whatever that was. The memory of that dark forest and the silent figure still haunts my thoughts. I am a maintenance worker for a small business, a company that designs and manufactures specialized electronic components. They run all their operations during the day, from early morning until late afternoon, with a bustling office and production floor. So, I work overnight, usually from 8 o'clock in the evening to midnight on weekdays. It makes my job easier because I do not have to work around them and vice versa. It is technically just a part-time job, but it helps pay my bills. This particular night, I arrived a little late, maybe 15 minutes past my usual start time, but I clocked in right away and got to work. I started by emptying trash cans, then moved on to wiping down surfaces in the common areas. About an hour went by. I was cleaning off one of the desks in the main office area when the phone in the front of the building started ringing. It was loud, echoing in the quiet, empty space. Obviously, the place was closed, and I did not have any business answering it, so I let it ring through the voicemail. But a couple of minutes later, it rang again, then again, and again, a persistent, annoying sound. I knew it was not my boss or anyone else that worked here, because they would have just texted or called me directly from my cell phone if it was something urgent. It is not like they were calling right after the place closed either. The service hours stopped at 6 o'clock in the evening, and it was around 9 o'clock right now. After the 5th time it rang, I walked up to the front desk and looked at the caller identification. It just said, "Unknown caller." I tried to decide whether to just mute the phone and leave it alone, or to just quickly answer and let them know we were closed, hoping they would stop. Ultimately, I did not want to deal with it, so I just decided to mute it, silencing the persistent ringing. I walked away from the front and continued with cleaning off the desks, wiping down keyboards and monitors. Probably 30 minutes went by, and I had totally forgotten about the phone. I kind of assumed that by now they had to have given up, realizing no one was going to answer. It was about 10 o'clock at night, and I was upstairs, taking a short break in the small coffee room, enjoying a quiet moment. That's when I heard a sound from below me. It was a beep, just a single, sharp electronic beep sound that I had never heard before in this building. It was distinct, unlike any alarm or machine. I did not think much of it at first. Perhaps it was some new equipment I was unaware of, until I heard a door open and close. My head literally turned toward the stairwell, and I just looked, completely stunned for a moment. Who could possibly be coming into the building right now? It was way too late for employees, and no one should have access. I was a little nervous, but really hoped that it was just a worker who forgot something important, or perhaps my boss checking in. I walked up to the open stairwell and listened for a second, straining my ears before calling out. "Hello? Is someone down there?" I heard subtle footsteps abruptly stop as soon as I called out. The silence that followed was heavy, profound. There was a pause. "Hello?" I said again, my voice a little louder, trying to project a sense of authority I did not feel. My body slowly filled with tension as I started to worry about the possible other scenarios. The quiet was unsettling. Then, I heard a couple more footsteps getting closer to the bottom of the stairwell, slow and deliberate. I quietly leaned over and looked down at the doorway that led into the main office. There was a shadow of a man. They were standing perfectly still, probably just a foot or two from the entrance to the stairwell. It looked like they were waiting for me or something, their silhouette dark against the dim hallway. After a really unnerving few seconds, with no movement from the shadow, I backed away quickly and moved further into the coffee room. My heart pounded against my ribs. Then, I quietly pulled my phone out and called 911, my fingers trembling. I just hid behind the bar table, my eyes fixed on the empty stairwell, and whispered to the operator that there was someone in the building. It only took a couple of minutes for the first officer to make it. I heard him coming in, his footsteps heavy, and then he yelled for everyone to come out. I did not hear anyone else say anything, and he made it all the way upstairs without seeing anyone. He found me hiding behind the bar. We did not get any answers until we got hold of the security tapes the next morning. Disturbingly, the guy stood at the bottom of that stairwell for several minutes, holding a knife and looking absolutely unfazed by anything. He did not seem to have come in with the intention of hurting me, actually. It seemed like he had no idea I was there until I called out. However, once he knew I was there, it looked like he was 100% willing to harm me if I came in his way. He just waited silently, knife in hand. After a couple of minutes, and just before the officer arrived, he calmly left out the front door, vanishing into the night. I guess the biggest mystery is how he got a key card to unlock the door that generated the beep sound. Even I did not have a key card. I just had a normal metal key. He had access, I did not. The search is still open for the guy, and I still work there. Hopefully, this was just a one-time thing, but it definitely still has me feeling uneasy some nights, wondering who he was and what he truly wanted. My name is John, and I am 23 years old. I work at a 24/7 bar in my town that's known for our pizza and drinks. We do not really have any other food options, just the two, but people seem to enjoy it anyway. I never really understood why the owners decided they wanted us to deliver pizzas. It is a lot of hassle for probably not that much extra money, especially for a bar. But since we did not really get that many delivery orders, I was always the only driver during the 10 o'clock at night to 6 o'clock in the morning shift. It was a good way to make some extra cash. On this particular night, I walked into the place, and it was pretty crowded, even for a weekday. There were several large groups, and with deliveries being slow, I was helping out with waiting tables in the meantime. It was a chaotic but fun atmosphere. There were a few deliveries I made, maybe once an hour, mostly to nearby apartment complexes. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, there was another regular delivery for me to drop off. I grabbed a single large pizza pie, put it in the insulated bag, and got in my car. The address was about 15 minutes away, on the far side of town, so I typed it into my Google Maps and started driving. Everything up until this point was completely normal. This was just like any other delivery, a routine task. And honestly, I was happy to get out of the crowded, noisy bar and onto the quiet, empty roads. While driving, though, I got caught off guard when my Google Maps suddenly said I had arrived. I was not even in the neighborhood. The voice announced my arrival, but I was on a dark, deserted road, surrounded by trees. I pulled over on the curb, confused, and tried to figure out where I had gone wrong. I double-checked everything. The address, the cross streets. But this was the address that was on the order. It was for the entrance to a forest preserve or a park or something. A vast expanse of dark woods. There were not even any houses nearby that it could have been mixed up with. It made no sense. So, I called the customer's number, hoping for some clarity. It rang for less than a second before they picked up, an unnerving speed. "Hey, this is John," I said, trying to sound professional. "I'm just trying to deliver your pizza, but I think you've given us the wrong address. I'm at the entrance to the nature reserve." There was a strangely long pause. I could hear the guy breathing into the phone, a slow, deliberate sound, before he described my car and said to look to my left. I did as he said. I literally saw nothing but a completely pitch-black forest, an impenetrable wall of darkness, stretching into the unknown. No sign of life. Then I saw something move. It was him, a dark figure in the distance, waving his arms in the air to get my attention. He was standing in the forest, perhaps 20 feet in, behind the road, partially obscured by the trees. I do not know why he did not just come onto the side of the road where it was easier to see, or even why he ordered it here to begin with. It was all very strange. I got out of my car, the pizza in my hand, and started walking over, a sense of unease starting to prickle at the back of my neck. It was hard not to notice how eerily quiet it was outside next to this forest preserve. There were no cars anywhere, no other people, no sounds of animals, just a profound, heavy silence. I found it really odd too, that as I walked up, the guy did not move. He did not meet me halfway. He just stood there, still, and watched me walk across the street and up to the grass, just before the edge of the forest where he was at. His stillness felt menacing. I stopped halfway through the grass, realizing this was getting really weird. My gut told me to leave. I waved him over to come grab the pizza and pay for it, trying to keep my voice steady. The guy hesitated for a moment, and instead of walking up to me, he looked behind me and on either side, pretty obviously looking for any bystanders. His head darted back and forth. My nerves were really high at this point, which made it hard to think straight. If my mind was clear, I definitely would have just taken off from my car and left without the payment. But before I could come to my senses, before I could make a decision, the guy started approaching me. He was walking really fast and did not slow down when he got closer. His pace was deliberate, relentless. I stumbled back, trying to create distance, but it was too late. The guy grabbed my upper arm with a strong grip and started pulling me back toward the forest. He was clearly trying to be quiet though, not yelling or anything, but instead putting all of his efforts into forcing me back into the dark woods. We struggled back and forth for several seconds. His grip was strong, surprisingly so. I realized I could not break free from his hold, so I started punching instead, aiming for his face. It only took a few clean shots to his face before he let go. By then, we were only a few feet from the dark edge of the forest. I took off running, scrambling back towards my car, my lungs burning, my heart pounding. I looked back only to check if he was following. I saw him get up and run into the forest, disappearing into the trees. But to my horror, two other guys came out from behind the trees, shadowy figures emerging from the darkness, confirming my worst fears. They were all silent. I scrambled into my car, fumbling with the keys, and drove straight to the police station that was on the other side of the block. But obviously, the guys had completely run off by then. There was no trace of them. I actually went back to work after that, still shaken, explaining what happened to my boss and asking if he had any info on the guy's order. All he had was a phone number, which was already disconnected, and a first name that was most likely fake. After that, he sent me home early with a free slice of pizza, which was not exactly a fair trade for what I had just gone through, but I was not complaining. If I had been dumb enough to walk up to the forest that night, I probably would have been instantly jumped by all three men. with no witnesses around to help. Luckily, my hesitance to approach him made it an easier fight to escape. But it very quickly could have turned into something far worse. The memory of those two other figures emerging from the darkness of the forest, silent and menacing, still chills me to the bone. I am grateful for my survival, but the fear of the unknown, of what those men truly intended, remains. During a period of my life where I was mostly living on the road, traveling from city to city, I often made money through house sitting and dog sitting. It was super easy and convenient to get temporary jobs that way, and it also paid me to stay at sometimes really nice houses for several days or even weeks. It was a perfect arrangement for a transient lifestyle. I was scheduled to dog and house sit at a place in Washington for a week. I drove up there on a Thursday and met the owners and their dog. It was a large golden retriever named Apple. She was extremely friendly and loving right from the start, a warm golden ball of fur and enthusiasm. Only an hour after arriving and getting acquainted, the owners left for their vacation, their bags packed. With them gone, I decided to explore the house a bit, just to make myself more comfortable. I was going to be there for 5 to 6 days, and it was a really large home, sprawling and luxurious. It was in a very remote area of the national forest, nestled deep within the trees, far from any other civilization. I mean, this place had to be at least worth $1 million, with its expansive windows and grand design, and it honestly felt surreal to be staying there. That first day, I played with Apple, throwing her ball and letting her chase squirrels. I just got used to the home, figuring out where everything was, settling into the quiet rhythm of the remote house. Then, I ate dinner and took her out for a walk around 7 o'clock in the evening. The sun was slowly setting, casting long purple shadows through the trees. And the whole road I was walking along was a peaceful wooded area, completely silent save for the rustle of leaves. There were no other houses visible in any direction, just endless trees. I brought Apple down the gravel road for about 15 minutes, enjoying the last light of day, then turned around and headed back. As we got back to the driveway, though, a figure emerged from the deep shadows. There was a guy. He was walking down the driveway, away from the house, and as he passed by me, he kept his head down and did not say anything. He looked like he was in his 30s, with short black hair and some baggy jeans. Now, this was a really long driveway, perhaps a quarter of a mile long. It took a whole 3 minutes of walking just to get from the road to the house. But there were no other houses connected to this property, no other roads or paths. So where the hell could he be coming from other than the house itself? A cold knot formed in my stomach. I hurried Apple up to the home, pulling her along, and got us both inside, locking all the doors just in case. The only thing I could think of was that he was exploring the woods or something, and just happened to pop out by the driveway, a strange coincidence. Seeing him walking away, though, I hoped that whatever it was not something to worry too much about. I tried to rationalize it away, dismissing the immediate unease. Nothing else happened that day, and I went to bed that night around 10 o'clock, still feeling a slight prickle of anxiety. This next day, I did not do much. I relaxed inside with Apple, watching a movie while eating leftovers from yesterday's dinner. I felt like staying up late though, and the house had this really awesome upstairs balcony with a fire pit, overlooking the dense forest. So, once the sun set, I lit up a campfire in the pit and sat on the lounge chair, enjoying the crackling flames and the quiet night. Apple stayed with me for a while, lying at my feet, but she ended up going back inside to lay in her bed after about 30 minutes, perhaps finding the night air too chilly. 30 minutes passed, and it was maybe 11:30 when I heard Apple start barking from inside the house. It was not just a typical bark though, not a playful sound. It was very sudden and frantic, a series of sharp, urgent barks that escalated quickly. Knowing she was such a friendly dog, usually only barking at squirrels, this really caught me off guard. My heart immediately began to race. I jumped up from the chair and ran inside, pulling open the balcony door. She was still barking, and the sound was coming from the other side of the upstairs hallway. When I looked down the long corridor, I saw one of the doors to a spare bedroom was open. And I could clearly see Apple in the room with her tail tucked between her legs, staring intently at one side of the room, still barking furiously. I called her name, trying to calm her, but she just continued to bark, her body rigid with fear. So I hurried into the room. Her gaze was fixed on a door, a solid wooden door that led to a closet. I could feel my adrenaline start kicking in as I moved toward it, drawn by her frantic barks. I slowly cracked the door open. It was pitch black in there, a profound darkness that seemed to absorb all light. I did not know where the light switch was, but I could tell it was a large walk-in closet, full of clothes hanging everywhere. And somehow, even in that absolute darkness, my eyes locked on a small gap between two hanging coats. There was an eye staring right back at me. For a moment, I froze, unable to move, unable to breathe. Pure, unadulterated terror seized me. Then, with a scream caught in my throat, I quickly slammed the door shut, my hands still shaking. I could hear the clothes rustling inside the closet as I grabbed Apple's collar and rushed her downstairs and straight into my car. I did not stop to grab anything else. I started the engine, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, and drove away as fast as I could, speeding down the long driveway and onto the main road. I called 911 once I was a safe distance away, my voice trembling as I recounted what had happened. Once police arrived, I waited anxiously for 10 minutes as they searched the home, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, but they came out alone. The guy had already left, vanishing into the night. We went over everything, and I told them about the person that I saw yesterday walking down the driveway, but that was really all I knew, and I really could not confirm if it was the same person. What the officers told me is that the man probably knew the family was going on vacation and thought the house would be empty. An easy target. What he intended to do is unclear though, and honestly, I am not convinced that he broke in and hid in the closet without knowing I was there. I think he knew, which only makes it more terrifying. Thankfully, Apple noticed him and got my attention, because without her, I do not know what would have happened that night. Her frantic barks saved me from what could have been a truly horrifying encounter. I live in St. Louis, Missouri, right in the heart of the city. The high crime rate is no exaggeration, as there are news stories coming out every day about awful things happening. News reports filled with chilling accounts. Living here, though, I had actually never had anything happen to me up until this point, and never even seen anything happen personally. I always felt like whatever was going on was kind of outside of my life, a distant, unsettling hum. So I tried to go about life as normal. I worked for both Uber Eats and DoorDash, usually on my bike since I was in the city, and it was often faster than a car in traffic. This day, I was doing mostly Uber Eats, and I had started around dinner time, cycling through the busy streets. The weather was not great, cloudy and raining off and on, a miserable drizzle. But it is part of the job sometimes, as the money is not going to make itself. Around 11 o'clock at night, I found myself pretty far from my usual location, in the middle of the city. With the rain getting worse, I was thinking about just biking back to kind of reset my location closer to home, when an order popped up that was too hard to refuse. $30 for a delivery 2 miles away. That was an excellent payout. For reference, I was on the edge of the city, where it merges into a more suburban area with small, older homes and large, blocky apartment buildings. It was not a nice area by any means, looking a bit run down, but it was nowhere I had not been before. I rode up to the restaurant and got the bag of food, then strapped it securely to my bike's carrier. As I was doing this, a car's headlights were lighting up the sidewalk I was on. It was parked a little ways down the street and had been there the whole time I was waiting for the order. I got on my bike and started heading out, and as I did, I saw the headlights move out from the curb and continue behind me. Just a coincidence, I assumed, a car simply moving on its way. But as I made a few turns and cycled into the neighborhood, that same car was still behind me. It was keeping a consistent distance, not too close, but always there in my rear view. After a couple of minutes, I made it to the apartment building that the delivery was for. It was a tall, imposing structure, dimly lit. I pulled up to the bike rack and swung my chain around it, securing my bike. Moments later, the car pulled into the parking lot. Now I was freaking out a little. Maybe it was still a coincidence, but I was still a bit on edge about them possibly stealing my bike. The thought flashed through my mind. I grabbed the order and hurried inside, trying to drop it off quickly and get out of there. I went up to the second floor, my feet echoing on the worn steps, and got to the room. I knocked on the door. It was a cash payment, which a lot of people do around here, but was super inconvenient right now. As I waited for them to answer, I looked down the hallway. It was dimly lit and really run down. Paint was peeling on the walls. There were missing ceiling tiles and even some dark mold near some of the doors. It was also oddly quiet for such a large building, a strange, oppressive silence. Quiet enough for me to hear a couple of people coming up the steps from the main entrance below. I knocked on the door again, my heart starting to pound, but kept my eyes fixed on the end of the hallway. I could feel my heart rate rising, like my body knew something was wrong about this situation. Then, two men showed up at the end of the hallway. They were walking toward me, their strides purposeful, making direct eye contact, like they were staring me down. The person in the room still did not open up, and I did not know what to do. I tried to leave, to walk past the two men, but they spread out, blocking the whole corridor, and pushed me back against the door I had just knocked on. Then, the door suddenly swung open. Another man, clearly with these two, helped force me into their room, pushing me inside. They slammed and locked the door behind me. I was screaming for my life at this point, my voice raw, with no idea what was going on. They threatened me, their voices low and menacing, and took me into the bedroom, which was completely empty of anything. No furniture, no decorations, just bare walls. They tossed me in and locked the door from the outside. I sat there in the middle of the small, empty room, feeling utterly hopeless and terrified. I could hear the three men talking in the next room, their voices muffled but distinct, and I heard them say something about getting both of us into a car. Both of us? I did not know what that meant. Then there was screaming. Not from the men, though. It was from police officers, their voices loud and clear, yelling for them to open the door. From what it sounded like, the men did not put up any fight. I was helped out not too long after, shaking but unharmed, which was when I figured out what both of us meant. There was another victim in one of the other rooms, another delivery driver. I guess 10 minutes before I got there, they had done the exact same thing to a different delivery person. They ordered food, followed them, and then kidnapped them. A neighbor had heard the commotion from the first incident and called for help, which is why the police arrived so quickly, saving both of us. As far as what was going to happen if nobody showed up, we cannot say for certain. None of the men said a word about their intentions, remaining completely silent during questioning. So, all the police can do is assume, based on any evidence they could find. Luckily, it seemed like this was their first attempt at something like this, so hopefully, it will be their last. I cannot imagine what would have taken place if not for the neighbors saving us. It was a terrifying experience that still gives me nightmares, a stark reminder of the dark side of city life. I am eternally grateful to that unseen neighbor whose quick thinking saved me. I work for a tech company as a customer support agent on their 24/7 live chat service. My job is to answer questions, troubleshoot issues, and help customers with their various tech problems, all through text. Because of the nature of the job, I get to work from home, which is a huge convenience. The downside, though, was that I was an overnight worker, taking calls and chats from midnight until 8 in the morning. Being in the comfort of my own home and having to pull an all-nighter was a recipe for disaster when it came to staying awake and focused. This was a regular work night. I have my plugin open on my laptop that automatically receives new chats, a little notification that popped up when a customer needed help. I would probably get 5 to 10 customers an hour, and each chat usually resolved within 2 minutes. So a lot of my job was just waiting for the next incoming query. I kept a hot cup of coffee on my desk to stay alert, and had YouTube open on my other monitor, playing quiet background music or videos to keep me entertained during the lulls. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, maybe a little earlier, I was helping a customer figure out their refund when I heard something outside. It was a man, seemingly calling out for someone to help them. His voice was hoarse, almost a cry for assistance, and it seemed to carry clearly through the night. Something about it sent chills through me, a prickling sensation on my skin, as it sounded like they were right outside my house, perhaps by my back door or in my yard. Being in the middle of a chat, though, I could not get up to check who it was right away. Also, I was not even sure if I wanted to. I had a bad feeling about it, an immediate sense of dread. I continued to help the customer, typing my responses, while hearing this man calling out in the background for several minutes, his cries for help becoming increasingly unsettling. Once I was done with the chat, I decided to just look out the window and see what was going on. Whoever it was, though, I knew they could not possibly need help that bad if they were standing in the same spot, yelling, for multiple minutes. It seemed less like a cry for help and more like a deliberate, prolonged noise. I went downstairs, moving quietly. After hearing them call out again, I realized they were somewhere near the back of my house, perhaps by the back door or in my backyard. I went up to the window that overlooked the backyard and peeked through the blinds, my heart starting to pound. My backyard was fenced in, a tall wooden fence enclosing the space. But standing right in the middle of the yard was some guy. He yelled again, a loud, raspy cry, but his body did not move. He was completely still, his posture rigid. It looked unnatural, as he was standing there, looking as if nothing was wrong. Just a quiet figure in the night, even as his voice echoed around the yard. It was really dark, but I could tell he was wearing a hoodie and dark jeans. I figured it was probably best to just leave this guy alone. He was probably drunk or some kind of drug addict, just shouting into the night. I left the window and went back upstairs, deciding to ignore him. Almost as soon as I left, though, the guy stopped yelling. The sudden silence was jarring. It kind of creeped me out, like he somehow knew I was there, watching him, and stopped his charade. But I hoped that it just meant he was leaving, moving on. A minute later, I got another customer to help, the notification popping up on my screen. I started typing in my message, preparing to answer their query, and before I could finish, an extremely loud knocking suddenly came from downstairs. I could tell from the hollow plastic sound that it came from the back door, the same door that overlooked my backyard. I knew it had to be that guy, which now made me incredibly nervous. My heart hammered against my ribs. What could he possibly want? Clearly, whatever it was, he was not going to leave without it. I quickly finished typing my message to the customer, my fingers flying across the keyboard, then picked up my phone and reported the guy to the police, my voice a frantic whisper. Then, I went back downstairs, compelled by some morbid curiosity or a desperate need to understand. I looked down the hallway, and immediately, I could see him standing at the back door. His face was pressed into it, distorted against the glass, as he stared through the door right at me, his eyes wide and unblinking. He started hitting the door again, a relentless, loud pounding, and I was not sure what else to do, so I kind of just stood there, paralyzed by fear. After maybe 30 seconds, his face fell flat, the intensity gone. He backed away from the door. Then, he walked through my backyard and climbed the fence, surprisingly agile, disappearing over the top. As I watched, thinking this was all over, that he was finally leaving, I could see his figure moving through the gaps in the fence panels. And that's when I noticed several more figures moving outside the fence, shadowy shapes in the deeper darkness beyond my yard. There were others. Police took my account of what happened, and I described the guy as best I could. I think it was a whole group plotting something, perhaps a coordinated attack. Maybe the one guy was just to get me to open the door, and the rest would come after. I really do not know. I just pray this was a random attempt and not something they were specifically going after me for. If that's the case, then that might not be the last I see of them, and that thought, more than anything else, chills me to the bone. The image of those silent figures waiting in the dark remains vivid in my mind. I work night shifts at a hospital, specifically in the emergency room. I am the front desk worker that typically checks people in, getting their information, but we still see a lot of crazy things here. Each night is unpredictable, a revolving door of injuries, illnesses, and strange occurrences. This particular night started out quiet. We had a few people come and go, mostly minor ailments, but nothing too big happened. I was mostly sitting at my desk, talking to my coworker Amy about whatever we could think of, trying to pass the time during the slow hours. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, Amy went on break to go to the cafeteria, leaving me alone at the front counter. Really soon after, like not even a minute after she left, a man came through the front doors. He was wearing a black zip-up hoodie and black jeans. His hair was dark and somewhat long, and looked unkempt, like he had not showered in days, or maybe had just woken up from a very long sleep. He walked up to the counter slowly, his steps deliberate, and had this strange aura about him. It made me feel unsettled, an immediate sense of unease. His eyes seemed to scan the room, taking everything in. "I'm looking for Hannah Smith," he said, his voice low and somewhat gravelly. I did not remember the exact name he gave, but it was a woman's name, and as far as I knew, they had not been admitted recently. Still, I checked the records, typing the name into the computer, but I saw no one by that name. The man seemed uncomfortable as he waited, shifting his weight from foot to foot. I told him there is not anyone here by that name, and that he may need to check other hospitals in the area, offering a polite but firm dismissal. He awkwardly nodded, a strange twitch to his lips, and then walked out, disappearing through the automatic doors. I glanced at the security guard, who was standing at the other side of the room near the waiting area. We both made eye contact, a silent agreement that that guy was a little strange, his behavior out of place. A half hour later, Amy came back, oblivious to the strange visitor. The rest of that shift was quiet and slow, thankfully uneventful. I got out at 4 o'clock in the morning, saying goodbye to my coworkers and heading out to the parking lot. This was not the largest hospital, but the parking lot was really oversized. It was huge, stretching out into the darkness, and all the workers were supposed to park in the back to make room for patients closer to the building. As I walked to my car, a weird feeling came over me, a sudden cold premonition. I randomly thought back to that man that came in earlier, the one looking for Hannah Smith. I do not know why, but I suddenly felt unsettled again, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. Maybe it was the eerily quiet parking lot at night, the way the shadows danced between the cars. I walked a bit faster, quickening my pace, got up to my car, and got in. I tossed my bag on the passenger's seat and started driving. I lived about 20 minutes away. The roads were long and empty, stretching out into the darkness. But throughout that drive, I still could not shake the strange feeling. I felt like I was being followed or watched, an intense sense of observation. Yet, every time I looked in the mirrors, nobody else was on the road behind me. It was completely deserted. When I finally got home, I pulled into my driveway and parked, turning off the engine. I got out and walked toward my front door, fumbling with my keys. I had not even taken my shoes off yet when I heard footsteps sprinting up to the porch. They got right up to the door and immediately shook the handle, trying to open it. Thankfully, I always instinctively lock the door every time I open or close it, a habit I developed living alone. As soon as they realized it was locked, they stopped, the shaking ceasing. There was a pause, a moment of profound silence, before a familiar voice spoke. "Excuse me, ma'am, can you please open the door? I need help. Please open the door." It was the creepy guy from the hospital. His voice was lower now, more desperate, but undeniably his. I did not respond. My hands shaking violently, I took my phone out and called the police, my fingers fumbling with the numbers. Seconds later, the man bolted away, his footsteps fading into the distance. I looked out the peephole and saw him run down the road and disappear in the dark, but confirming it was definitely the same guy with the black hoodie and black jeans. When police arrived, I was hit with probably the most insane, creepy, and downright horrifying information. The back door to my car in my driveway was wide open. He had been in the back seat the entire drive home, hidden there, which explained how he got up to my front door so fast. He had ridden with me, silent and unseen, for 20 minutes. Even more disturbing is that he was probably hoping I would park in my garage, which would essentially give him access to my entire house, an easy entry point. That night, Parking in the driveway probably caught him off guard and likely saved my life. They used the footage from the hospital security cameras to identify the man and found him a few days later. He was some nobody that I had never met in my life, a complete stranger, but he had some strange fixation with me. He had stalked me from outside the hospital for weeks, figuring out which car I drove, and probably just trying to find a night that I accidentally left my car unlocked for too long. Even though he was caught, he never admitted to anything and just repeatedly said that he wanted to talk to me, and that was it. This was a while ago, but I have not heard or seen anything about him since. The memory, though, of him riding in my car, unseen, still makes my blood run cold. It is a chilling reminder of how quickly an ordinary night can turn into a nightmare.